Hello everyone, Arlecchino has finally arrived and will be coming in Genshin patch 4.6 as our third playable Fatui Harbinger. We've already got pretty reliable information on her kit from translation, and as someone who has played this game since launch, I feel like this is one of, if not the most complex DPS kit HOYO has released. Understanding what her abilities do can be a challenge, although the actual gameplay seems to be quite straightforward. I'm super excited for her, so let's get straight into the kit, possible builds, and teams. Remember that these are initial information, so very subject to change. Before we do anything, let me explain what the Bond of Life mechanic is. This mechanic only appears 4 times in the game in 2 weapons and in 2 enemies. When your character receives a Bond of Life, they basically get a separate health bar that will need to be healed first before healing the actual HP of your character. Taking the wiki photo as an example, we can see that Aether has a Bond of Life with a certain HP percentage. If he takes damage, say 300 damage, his normal HP will drop. If you swap to Barbara to heal him, let's just say 500 HP, Aether will not be healed to full in this case. The healing needs to go through the Bond of Life health bar before being able to heal the character. This is a very niche mechanic, but for Arlecchino, her entire kit revolves around Bond of Life. However, she deals with it very differently. Normally, healing will clear the Bond of Life. However, Arlecchino's special passive makes it so that she cannot be healed through any means other than her own elemental skill while in combat. In addition, Arlecchino doesn't want to heal off Bond of Life like you do normally, but wants to continue gaining it, as you'll see. With that context, let's finally go over her abilities. Arlecchino is a 5-star Pyro polearm user, base stats are shown here, and ascends off crit damage. Her normal talent makes up the majority of her damage. If Arlecchino has a Bond of Life greater than or equal to 30% of her max HP, she'll gain 40% pyro damage, and in addition, she'll have an unoverridable pyro damage infusion for her normal charge and plunge attacks. During this state, which is called the Feast of the Crimson Death, her normal attacks are increased by the current Bond of Life percentage that she has multiplied by the enhancement ratio. For example, if Arlecchino has 100% HP Bond of Life, then to calculate the damage boost, you would do 100% of the enhancement ratio, which at level 10 is 238, so 100% of 238 is 238. Then you would add a 238% multiplier to each of the attack scalings that you see on each hit of her normal attacks. Each attack consumes 5.5% of the current Bond of Life percent. Since it consumes the current Bond of Life percent, the rate of decreasing is basically higher at higher values of Bond of Life and lower at lower values, kind of like a logarithmic graph. And remember that the higher the Bond of Life, the higher the multiplier, so she is a front-loaded carry, which is great. You want to take advantage of this Feast of the Crimson Death, so the TLDR is basically more Bond of Life equals more damage on normal attacks. And since this buff only works on normals, her main damage will be primarily from spamming that left click, kind of like Yoimiya. So Bond of Life is very important, but how do you get it? And that's where her skill comes in. Her skill has a 15-second CD and is a combination of AoE damage and then a dash attack. In addition, it removes all blood depth and heals Arlecchino based on how much Bond of Life you initially had. For instance, if you had 30% bond left and you used the skill, you would heal 30% HP. The damage is low because the main purpose of these attacks is to apply a dot called Blood Debt to the enemy. This mechanic is similar to Hu Tao's Blood Blossom. Blood Debt has 3 stages and it increases every damage tick, which occurs every 3 seconds up to 3 times. So the first initial Blood Debt tick means it's on stage 1, the second one 3 seconds later means it's on stage 2, and 3 seconds after that, stage 3. These stages are important because of her first talent. When Arlecchino performs a charged attack on an enemy with Blood Debt, she removes it from the main enemy and nearby enemies, and gains a Bond of Life depending on the Blood Debt stage. 20%, 25%, and 70% depending on the stage. You want to get this 70% every time because, like I said, more bond equals more damage. In addition, if you kill an enemy with Blood Debt, you instantly gain 70%, which kind of acts as a failsafe. The max Bond of Life you can get per skill usage is 80%, which prevents some shenanigans you can do in AoE. So the TLDR of this skill is you use your skill to apply Blood Debt around your enemies, you charge attack so you remove that Blood Debt, and you gain Bond of Life. Again, Bond of Life equals damage. Her ult is very simple, it's just a nuke of AoE pyro damage, 60 energy cost, 50 second CD. The most important thing is that she gains 15% Bond of Life, so makes ER a fine stat to have. The last thing from her base kit is her second talent. For every 100 attack over 1000, Arlecchino gains 1% elemental and physical resistance up to 20%. With attack buffs, which is what she really wants, you'll reach this cap pretty easily. Because Arlecchino doesn't get any healing, these tank stats are pretty valuable so she doesn't die while you're on fielding her, especially in the absence of a shield. Talent priority, looking at it right now, definitely normal attack over all. Ult and skill is pretty similar. I would say ult over skill, but it doesn't really matter. Next, let's go over her Constellations. C1 makes it so that whenever you do an enhanced hit from your infusion normal attacks, there's a 33% chance that it doesn't reduce your bond of life by 5.5% of the current bond of life, but instead increase it by 5% max HP. Great Constellation gives you more bond equals more damage. C2 makes it so that your blood debt starts at the second stage, which saves 3 seconds, and when a third stage blood debt is removed, Arlecchino does an additional AoE power damage, which is 900% of her attack. Basically, every time you skill, you get a 900% nuke, and this is very similar to just Ayato's C6. C3 is just normal attack 3 levels, very nice. C4 gives 25% extra max HP bond of life from using her burst, and blood debt starts at the third stage, so you don't have to wait anything, and removing blood debt reduces her burst CD by 2 seconds and restores 15 energy, and this has a 10-second cooldown. And lastly, C6 pretty much gives her another nuke on her dash attack and gives her crit rate and crit damage on her normal attacks and burst. Overall, all of these cons are pretty good for damage increases except for C5, which is kinda meh. These may be the best constellations on a singular character, since most of the time characters get some good ones and some bad ones, so if you're wailing for her, you're gonna be eating good. Next, onto weapons. Let's go over her signature first. It's pretty much a scythe that only appears as a scythe if you equip it on her, so drip factor, get it. Stat-wise, it gives crit rate, and it basically gives you another source of bond of life, 25% max HP when you perform a charged attack, and just gives you pretty much 20% damage bonus. This effect, I feel like it's one of the first I've seen in Genshin where it's not just like a damage buff, but actually gives a mechanic, and in this case, it's a source of bond of life. Yes, bond of life does translate to damage, but it's not just, oh, gain plus 50% damage bonus. This kind of reminds me of a certain Raiden's light cone in Starro, and I wonder if this is the start of more Honkai Starro style weapons in Genshin. Next, other 5-star options. I feel like you can choose any. I'll just give 5 examples here. Homa, Jade, Calamity Queller, Staff of Scarlet Sands, and even Spine because of the ER might be helpful. If you have any of them, probably be fine. As for 4-star premium options, I think both of the Battle Pass weapons are pretty good. It's just a crit stat stick, which is good for a DPS. You can also go Dragon's Bane if you're planning on primarily focusing on vaping, but I think the crit ones are a bit better. As for complete free-to-play options, the 2 that come in mind are Mist of Wind Spear and White Tassel. Again, just stats damage. As for artifact sets, there is a new artifact set coming in the next patch, and one of them is entirely catered toward Arlecchino. It gives 18% attack and pretty much 50% damage bonus, because the condition is bond of life increasing or decreasing, and Arlecchino is constantly doing that. This set is basically only for her, and it will be her best set by a quite significant margin. The other set is the burning oriented set, which isn't useless. I feel like it's not too bad, so it's not a completely dead domain. While you're farming for Arlecchino's artifact set, you can just stick with either a 2-piece or 4-piece gladiators. Now there are 2 artifact sets which I will say you don't want to use. First, do not use Marachusei Hunter. Second, do not use Shimenawa's. Marachusei Hunter requires HP increasing or decreasing. Arlecchino cannot be healed, so the only way you are changing HP is your 1 instance of healing from her skill or from normally taking damage. Sure, you could have Furina, but that only drains her to 50% and she can't be healed, so it is not consistent. As for Shimenawa's, her burst giving 15% bond of life is actually significant, so I don't think you want to just subtract 15 energy to make you have even less uptime on your burst. Artifact stats are very simple. Attack percent, pyro damage, crit, very simple. If you're vaping, you can swap it for EM. Substep priority, again, crit. EM if you're vaping, attack percent and ER, and I would say ER 120% to 130% is a good goal to have. With her builds and overall kit done, let's take a step back to go over all of Arlecchino's sources of bond of life. Remember, more bond equals more damage because the increased normal attack multiplier from Feast of the Crimson Death. I've summarized it in this image. So, burst gives 50%, skill, you can remove blood debt at different stages to get different amounts of bond of life. Typically, it'll be at 70, and I don't think you'll cap at 80 if you're considering single target. Signature weapon gives 25% bond of life with a charged attack. And lastly, Constellations. C1 gives you that chance of gaining 5% bond instead of consuming it, and C4 just gives a flat 25% to her burst. Now, realistically, the amount of bond you'll get at C0 Arlecchino is 85%, and with her weapon, 110. C1 Arlecchino is a little bit more difficult to visualize, but from what I've seen, it's a similar damage to her signature weapon. So I made this rough sheet comparing the bond of life that you get and the amount of damage bonus that you get comparing C0R0 Arlecchino and C0R1 Arlecchino. So first we can see the number of hits that you can get, and her normal attack combo, which is just N1 to N6, but N4 has like 2 specific hits. The bond of life HP going down 5.5% of her current HP every single time you do a hit, and the corresponding damage bonus with the averages on the bottom. Now keep in mind that once you go below 30%, you don't get pyro damage or like any enhanced bonuses, so under 30% bond completely useless. So here are the main takeaways. Number one, obviously with more Bond of Life, you can just do more enhanced normal attacks. You might not necessarily want to do this though, depending on rotation length. Second is the average Bond of Life HP and the average damage bonus. Obviously with more Bond of Life HP, you're gonna have a higher average. Now last thing I want to point out is, let's just say we want to end at like 15 hits regardless. We don't care about extending field time. All we have time are the 15 hits. Now we can see that even just comparing hit 15 and hit 15, the actual damage value is obviously going to be increased, right? So the thing I want to visualize here is not just the difference between R1 and R0, but actually the difference between bursting and non-bursting, to kind of show you that bursting and that 50% of Bond of Life is actually helpful. You can imagine just gaining that extra 15% Bond of Life, your average hits will do more damage, you're going to be front loading more damage, and if you just end at like a specific point like right here, you can see 30% more Bond of Life, 49% more Bond of Life, but if you just end it, use your second skill, you're going to be healing more, which helps with her survivability. So I just wanted to visualize the importance of her Bond of Life. Now knowing this, we can kind of set up a general rotation. So pretty much you want to Arlecchino skill first because that resets it. So you want to make sure it's at 0 when you start a rotation. Then you set up whatever your supports have and wait for that blood death to reach the 3rd stage, because after you skill, you need to wait 6 seconds for the blood death to reach the 3rd stage. Then after all your support setup, you can go back to Arlecchino, perform a physical charged attack, and that will consume the blood death and you'll gain Bond of Life. You can fit in your burst here if you have it, then proceed to just normal attack spam, N1 to N6, and pretty much just repeat once you're done. So pretty simple. This is pretty much why I said in the intro that Arlecchino's mechanics are complex, but the actual gameplay is quite straightforward. Next, let's go over my initial thoughts on team building and our potential teams. Remember that Arlecchino cannot receive any external healing other than her skill, and since she's a Pyro on-fielder main DPS, you'll basically be playing the team as if you had no healer. This can be mitigated with shielding like from Zhongli and Toma, or damage mitigation from Dea or Xingqiu. This also gives resistance to interruption, which we are not quite sure Arlecchino inherently has at the moment. However, in my opinion, it seems her best teams will either be Vape or Overload oriented, and in those teams, the shielders and Dea can't really fit in those team comps unless you sacrifice a good amount of damage instead. Thus, I think Zhongli, Toma, and Dea with Arlecchino will be mainly played in Mono-Pyro teams, which will be fine but nothing mind-blowing. Next, let's talk about Vape and address the elephant in the room, Furina. Consistent with the story, Arlecchino and Furina don't have the best of synergy. Since Arlecchino can't be healed, she'll be consistently low HP from Furina's HP drain, and will be unable to generate fanfare once you reach 50% HP. Yes, she can heal at Arlecchino's second skill cast with Bond of Life, which will likely be 30%, because that's the end of the infusion, but that won't be enough combined with enemies hitting you. However, since Furina is such a strong unit, this pairing can still be fine even if you are not getting the full benefits. These teams will pretty much require a team-wide healer like Shen Yun to heal the other party members, and unsurprisingly, it's looking like Shen Yun Furina Plunge version will be Arlecchino's best Furina-oriented Vape team. Hu Tao in the slot will generally be better, however, because she can take a better advantage of Furina. Now how about normal double Hydro Vape? We can just replace Hu Tao and put Arlecchino in for the Vape team. And this team is again fine, just like the Furina versions, but Hu Tao in the slot will generally be better. And with these Vape examples, we can see that Hu Tao takes better advantage of double Hydro teammates, mainly because of the absence of an attack buffer since Hu Tao scales on HP. And since Arlecchino is an attack scaler and there are no attack buffs in her inherent kit, she really likes and wants attack buffs, and as a result, her best teams are looking to have Bennett on the team. Two main teams come into mind. You can go VV Vape with Arlecchino, Yalan, Kazuo, and Bennett, and the second in an Overload team take advantage of Chevreuse, ideally C6, with Arlecchino, Chevreuse, Fischl, and Bennett. Both of these teams are looking quite strong at the moment, and they may determine her niche as a Pyro main DPS going forward. Now I know a lot of people will be wondering how Arlecchino matches up with other Pyro DPSs. The top 3 Pyro DPSs in my mind are Hu Tao, Linny, and Xiangling. I'll ignore Xiangling since her niche is off-field Pyro DPS, which leaves us with Hu Tao and Linny. At the moment, Arlecchino at a C0 baseline is pretty competitive with them, but definitely not a complete power creep. She's fine, teams are solid, but nothing drastically special, and this is something I feel with pretty much every main DPS in the game. You can choose one and most likely they'll perform, especially the newer released ones. Keep in mind Hu Tao and Linny teams are some of the best in the game, so Arlecchino being able to keep up is a good thing. And the way I see it, Hu Tao has the Vape niche, Linny has the Mono-Pyro niche, and Arlecchino will take over the Overload niche, especially as more characters release. And I think this is a good way to differentiate the 3 Pyro on-fielders. Now with more Constellations and Signature Weapon, Arlecchino will outperform both of them since her Constellations are very strong. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover about Arlecchino. I think her Bond of Life mechanic is extremely interesting, and I love this innovation of her kit. The details of it are complex, but the gameplay results are just simple normal attacks. Kind of parallels Genshin's combat system as a whole. simple on the outside, but can get quite involved when you dig deeper. Aesthetics and probably animation wise, she looks amazing, and at the current moment, it seems like her teams are solid in terms of DPS. I do have two main concerns about her, however. First, yes, according to very early calcs, her teams look fine, but considering the amount of restrictions she has, such as Bond of Life, no healing, etc., I feel like her damage can be better and not as conservative, considering the amount of hoops that you have to jump through to fully utilize her kit. Second, Arlecchino not receiving healing is a cool mechanic, however I can 100% see that most players will struggle playing her teams optimally. She's on healing, so whatever damage she takes from enemies, she can't really heal back up other than her skill, which only heals on the second cast onward in a rotation. Shields will help, but it will drop the damage she does. So because of these reasons, I am hoping and expecting buffs and will be quite surprised if nerfs come along her way. And with that, I hope you enjoyed my initial analysis on Arlecchino. I will be covering any changes coming your way, so make sure you subscribe to get my future thoughts on her updates. Feel free to like this video if you enjoyed and ask any questions you have in the comments. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.